it was my father. And my father was a strong enough individual to be the village father.
Oh,
And
wow.
I appreciate him every day. As strict as he was growing up, he is now like my best friend. And as I said, you learn life fast when you're around, a very, very strict father.
Right.
You learn life fast. Learn.
Welcome to season 2, episode 8 of your favorite teacher's favorite teacher podcast.
My name is Jay Murphy. I've been in education for 17 years. I am currently a CTE teacher who teaches business information management and principles of audiovisual technology. But I was a history teacher for the majority of those years, a U.S. history, world history teacher for the majority of those years.
History. Yeah, that's fun times right there.
Yes, it is.
Uh, I notice a lot of males like to go into history in
Yeah,
education. Ain't that something?
it
That's
is. I want to say the majority of my coworkers have been males.
that's
Mass
something.
majority.
Uh, I mean, that's where when I came into education, like that's where I started out before I went to RLA, and I don't see any males in
No,
RLA.
no.
But that's all part of the journey, which brings
Yes.
us to our very first section of the podcast, the section that I like to call the journey. And in this part, I have my guests talk to the audience about their journey from from the time that they made the decision to become an educator to where they are presently. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to you, Jay, and let
Okay.
you tell the people about your journey into education.
Mine isn't a very, um, I would say it's not like when I was in college, my heart was saying, I'm going to be a teacher. It's nothing like that. It's actually just a circumstantial situation that led me there. And what happened was I was in radio, television, film, and I
Mm,
was following my pathway that, my college counselors had set. They For whatever reason, there was a mistake in enrolling me in one of the prerequisites that I needed to take an upper level course, which basically was going to lead to a delay in my graduation. I did not like that, and I went to the main campus and counselor. I was like, "So, what is my fastest path options to graduate?" And they said, well, history. And I was like, "Okay," because I'd taken several African American studies classes in college, and I was like, "Okay, I'll switch me to that." And so
mm.
I finished with a history degree with a minor in English, and I was just thinking, what am I going to do with this degree? And I found out about alternative certification, and I said, I think that's what I'm going to try. I didn't know that I was quite ready to, I guess, go into what people call the real world in corporate America. So I was like, yeah, I'll give this a shot, and it turned out to be something that I've now, as far as my career goes, other than working while I was in college to make money to survive in college, it's been the only career I've had.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, so I don't count my experience in retail through from high school through college as a true career.
Right.
But so this has been the only career I've had. So I've left. I've taken two breaks, but I always get drawn back to education.
Yeah. And I mean, you said what, 17 years in
Yes, this is
education?
17 years.
That's that is a long time.
Yes, it is.
In that 17 years, let me ask you, have you what grade levels have you worked with? I know you middle school because that's where we're
Yes,
at right now.
yes. So eighth grade, but it's like I'm teaching a high school course in eighth grade,
Right.
but it's still eighth grade. And I've taught eighth grade 2 years prior. And
Okay.
the irony to that is, after that, I said I'll never teach middle school again, and here I am teaching at a middle school. So you always say these things, and I guess that's why they say never say never.
Right.
But but the majority of my career was high school, working at the junior level
Okay.
with U.S. history.
Okay.
Which in Texas isn't that's a great course.
So the high school and the junior high, once
Yes.
again, I always say it, junior high teachers, we're a special breed. You haven't, have you ever thought about or considered working on the elementary level at
No,
all?
It is just not me. Um, I can get by with the class that I'm teaching in middle school.
Right.
But the thing that I always appreciate about older kids is you can have older conversations with the
Right.
older kids.
Right. That
And at an elementary level, I just don't know how I can relate. I mean, so far this year, the longest discussion I've had with any student was about Naruto. I mean, that's about as
oh
far as
they
it
love some
goes, even at a
Naruto.
middle school level, right?
Yeah.
So, but older kids, especially in a class like social studies, you want to have those more mature conversations.
Yeah, I
And
get that.
but
I
CTE is very different. So it's okay. It's okay working that at a middle school level.
Okay. Well, and um, with that too, I'd like to get your um, thoughts on what is the difference between being at the middle school level versus the high school level. Because personally, just like
Mhm.
you, I don't like you say you don't see yourself working with elementary school grade kids. I can't see myself working with high school kids because I feel
Okay.
like middle school is like formative. And once they
Okay.
get to high school, they are the people they're going to be, you know?
To some
So
extent, yeah.
what's your view on working at the middle school versus working in the high school levels?
Um, I would say number one, I think it depends on region. Like
Right,
this high school experience is very different than when I worked in I mean middle school. I'm sorry. This middle school experience is very different.
right.
The level of respect is there versus where I was at middle school
Hmm.
in the inner city. There's a lot more respect over here, and I would just say that the biggest difference, as I said, is it's the maturity level, and the maturity level. What comes with the maturity level is the level of conversing you do with your
Welcome
students.
to season two,
The
episode
it's
7
really
of your
hard to
favorite
talk to
teacher's
middle school
favorite
kids
teacher
about something
podcast.
that's so far away from them,
Exactly.
for them to really understand the ramifications of all of their decisions that they're making now and how it can impact them. And I'm very honest with them, so I let them know, hey, you get a clean slate next year in high school, minus the courses you have with me, which are high school credit courses. So take care of these businesses and your CAP courses, but there you do have time. So I do think that there's a difference. Also, coaching at both levels is different
Right.
as well because I've also coached. And the one thing that I will say that I guess a lot of people don't like about high school is, like you said, they're kind of who they're going to be. And I would agree with that for the most part, but I've seen dramatic changes in
Okay.
students from one year to another when they're getting closer to the time of graduation. I've seen huge leaps and bounds. I think that big change happens. It starts to happen second semester of 10th grade year.
Okay.
But as I said, I think the biggest difference is just the maturation level, thus the level of conversing and the level of, I guess, they're starting to understand the real world a bit more.
Yeah.
You don't quite understand this real world that people say, even through college, 3 years in college. It's really not until you're there on your own and having to deal with it that you fully have, an understanding of what people mean when they say the real world, but they're at least able to comprehend it to some degree. And I and
Right.
I and I always view teachers as mentors before subject teachers. Like no matter what, and I tell my students all the time, like you may not like anything I teach, you may not like the subject, may not remember any of this, but it doesn't make me dislike you as a person, right? Like,
Right.
and
Right.
so I can still mentor you in some ways, whether you like this or not. There's a lot of people who hate history, and
Right.
I'm not trying to change their mind. I'm just trying to get them the knowledge so they can pass their star test and
Right.
move on,
Right.
right?
That yeah, that's
It's
that's a huge thing. But I think you brought up a much bigger point. Yes, we are. Our goal is to make sure that our students are able to get beyond these tests
yes,
that they have. But the biggest part is you talked about the mentor piece
yes,
in that because a lot of students, I know I was one of them growing up. uh, they need that mentor
Yes.
to help guide them in the right direction because if you don't step in at the right time, who knows what path they
Sure.
may take. And that's the beauty of being an educator. We see these young men and women who may be going down the wrong path, and we're able to, hey, this decision that you're making right now has long-term ramifications on the rest of your life. And I do get it in middle school, the talking about long-term ramifications to them is like tomorrow.
Yes.
Uh, but for high school kids, they can see that this can go uh, very far
Yes.
in their life. It could make them have a good day or a very bad day in the long term, which brings us to the next part of the podcast, the part that I like to call the yin and the yang. And in this part, I'd like for you to talk to the audience about one of your worst days as an educator and one of your best days as an educator. We try to end it off on a happy note. So
Okay.
we say best day last and worst day first. To give our audience a view of what it's like in today's classroom and the motivations that we have as educators to why we still do what we do. So talk to them about your worst day and one of your best days as an educator.
I don't know that I have a this one standout day where you're like, this is the worst that I've ever had. Because when you've been in it for 17 years, the worst can happen, at any given moment within those
Right.
17 years. And they all kind of it's almost like when you're and I'm sure it's for every career, when you've been in your career long enough, like you're there it's not there's not a degrees of like this one's worse than that one, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
almost like they're all the same in a way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like what angle is it coming from? But I would say the worst days are usually just any day where and it happens to every teacher. I don't think there's a teacher. I don't care how great their classroom management is or whatever, but when you almost are at work and you feel like you're doing everything you can, it's
Hmm.
not working,
Right.
and you're not getting the assistance
Hmm.
from people that are supposed to be assisting you and there for that reason, and you follow all the protocols and everything, and you still feel helpless.
Right.
Like I'm following the protocols that I
Right.
was told to follow, and the assistance that was supposed to be provided is not provided once you follow through with all protocol. And
Right.
I don't want to say I'm lucky enough in my 17 years to not have that happen often, but when it does happen after you do everything that you're asked of,
Hmm.
and you feel like you're kind of being left to the side, or and in some cases you feel like you've been thrown under the bus, when you're like, man, I'm like, because I almost feel like for education to be successful, it needs to be like a team, not just from the teacher aspect, but a team between teachers, admin as well. Like, we're supposed to be doing this together. And sometimes there's that line of separation. Like, I almost feel like I work best with admin that I can approach and talk to,
Exactly.
and they understand that I'm coming and talking to them as an equal,
Hmm.
not as you're a superior and I'm an inferior. Like, you have
Right.
your role to play in this school. I have my role to play, but at the end of the day, we're both equals.
Right.
And those are the ones that have had the best success with. So I would say that my worst days are just those days where because I'm willing to do what you ask of me, and so I just want it reciprocated. Like, I am going to work to your standards, so I need you to work to mine as well.
Right.
And I feel like when that relationship is severed, those are when you feel like you're having the worst days in education.
Yeah. And I can definitely get that. I've had those days as an educator myself.
Mhm.
Yeah, it can be. I guess the word for me is more demoralizing
Sure.
than anything, because it's like you say, we are a team, and this team consists of everybody playing roles on the team. Um, in any team,
Sure.
everybody has a specific thing that they do to make the team that much better. And when any aspect of that team fall short of the expectations, then, like I said, to me, that just becomes demoralizing. And I'm like, ooh, I
Another
can't.
word is demotivating. Like
Yes. Yeah.
it brings, and it can bring a school down. I've seen it
Right.
where it's not just you. It changes the entire morale of the school. And I just and I'm not saying that it's always like an admin's fault. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can be from the teacher side as well. And
Right.
like you said, because we are all interconnected and trying to do our job of helping these kids out as best we can. The last thing that we need is to feel demoralized and demotivated from a teacher and an admin perspective.
Exactly.
So, and I agree with that.
Yes. And well, that is the nature of the beast. Unfortunately, you talked earlier about not wanting to go into corporate America, and I'm sure in corporate America there are teams that are high performing teams, and teams that have, elements of it that
Yeah.
mess it up. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure like that's any and everywhere that you go. But finding those teams that gel together perfectly, once you get on those teams, you want to stay on those teams and
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
keep things the way that they are. So with that, let's jump into the next part, the one of your best days as an educator. And I know you probably had millions of
Yep.
them,
It's they're
millions.
all the same,
Right,
and
right.
my best is, coming from inner city schools. When I first started, I was at one of the considered at the time one of the worst schools in the country. And this is not a toot your own horn situation, but when you see a student that's on their way towards something awful, or the
Right.
consideration of dropping out, and when they tell you, like, you're the reason I stayed in school, and
Mm,
and and it's not, and when I say that those are my best days, it's not that I feel accomplished for doing that. It's because I feel good that that student is staying in school. It
yes.
doesn't matter if it was me that was the reason. It doesn't matter if it was another teacher on campus that was the reason. And so to me, those are the best. And that's one thing that you get from the inner city way more than you do out in the suburbs, is because obviously the dropout rates are higher in the inner city. And all of those things are when we used to do a reach out to dropout program, and that's when you would go out and talk to the kids who have dropped out. You actually do a home visit, and when you're a part of convincing a student to come back to school, because as I was saying before, even though it's higher in the high school level, as far as they have enough the cognitive ability to understand ramifications,
Hmm.
doesn't mean that they're all on that same level at that moment. And
Exactly.
everybody matures at a different rate. So when you know that you're when a student trusts you enough to say, I'm going to listen to your advice and I'm going to do my best to finish this,
Hmm.
I feel like then that's when you know that you're making an impact that, to me, that's much greater than a kid making an A in my class, or a kid, whether you're making an A or a C, the fact that you made this decision to at least get this high school diploma and see where life takes you after that,
Yeah.
versus leaving now when there's no certainty on what your future can hold. And yes, a high school diploma is just a step in the right direction, but at least you're helping them stay on that step and not go downstairs, if that makes sense.
Right. Right. I know in our household, that is the number one thing that we tell our sons. Hey, you you may not want to go to college after you graduate from high school, but the bare minimum is that you get that high school diploma. And it's teachers such as yourself that reach kids like our sons uh, in ways that we as parents can't. And that's a wonderful thing because back in the days, we used to say it all the time, it takes a village
Yep, the
to
village.
raise a
Mm.
kid. And that's so true. If there's any parents out there listening to this podcast right now, you know, you can tell your child something until you're blue in the face. And then another adult or a friend of theirs can tell it to them the same exact way that you did, and they listen to it.
Hmm.
So
For
like
sure.
it's you know, it's wonderful to have individuals such as yourself making that impact on our students and keeping them in school to graduate because like we say, don't know what tomorrow will hold for them, but we do know that at bare minimum, just having that
Sure.
diploma is going to open up the door, you know?
Sure. It could just gives you slightly more. I mean, even if we say that, and because there's a lot of people who will tell you, well, I got a high school diploma and I'm still doing something I could have done without it. But
Mm-hmm.
you have the option to take other steps
Right.
if you ever get tired of this, especially with the generation that changes careers so often. Like that, like they
Yes.
talk about like this younger generation. They say they usually switch, 4 to 5, from millennial on different
Yes.
careers, and it's at least getting you there where if you make that decision, like I want to do something else, whether it means you got to go get a certification, that's one less step you got to do. You don't have to go back and get a GED. Like you took care of that
Mm-hmm.
business at a younger age, which just saves you time and all those other things. So, as I said, just one more step forward in your progress of life, and that's as long as they're stepping forward and
Mm-hmm.
going up. I'm good. I'm good with that.
Yeah. That's yeah. You hit the nail on the head. Just get them where they need to be at the bare minimum and let them make
Yes.
decisions from there. So, with that, we are now going to transition to the next part of the podcast, the part that I like to call the namesake, your favorite teacher's favorite teacher. And in this part of the podcast, what I like my guests to do is just simply talk about teachers, motivators, mentors, anything that they could think of to any person that they could think of that has driven them to where they are in life currently. A lot of times for educators, I know they like to reference back to other educators that they've known growing up. But I try to open it up to even beyond education. If there's somebody in your life that maybe wasn't an educator that motivated you to become the successful individual that you are right now, or if it is an educator, this is your opportunity to give them their flowers and let them know, hey, you've impacted my life in a way that has allowed me to become the successful individual that I am today. So
Okay.
I'll turn the mic over to you.
Okay. So I would say there's several names I can think of, so I'll keep them all relatively brief, and I'll
Okay.
save my biggest inspiration for last, as far as the person who I feel responsible for where I am today.
Yes, sir.
I had a high school teacher. I suffered from senioritis. I would be lying if I didn't tell that to people. I did very well in high school until I caught senioritis as a junior second semester, So I started a little early. So I was, and I could go back and tell you reasons, but I digress when I say that there's reasons that it happened, but, um, there was just one teacher, like, I don't know what it was about him, but I just enjoyed being in his class.
Mm-hmm.
So I always just ended up taking classes that he was teaching. So I hated chemistry, but he taught Chem 2. So after Chem 1, I went to Chem 2 because he was the teacher of the class. I took his physics class and I love physics, but chemistry was never my thing. So just the fact that there was a teacher that, I enjoyed being in his class, and it got me into, classes like Chem 2 and all these other things. So I just felt like yeah, that he was just somebody who was a solid dude, like as far as just a good person in general.
Mhm.
Um, I'd be lying if I said I remember much of Kim 2 because, as I said, I didn't like it, so I couldn't tell you how good of a Kim 2 teacher he was. But the
Right.
fact that he was just a good person, his name was Mr. Collins, and so I do appreciate Mr. Collins for being a supportive individual. And I did go back to visit him one time, and just
Okay.
to thank him for just being creating a great environment in the class to make me want to be in there. And if I was, being a I don't know what word to use, I guess a butthead in your class, I apologize. But you did make me want to at least, move forward and join your classes. So thank you, Mr. Collins, for that. I don't remember a college professor's name that I had. It was my first year in college, but she taught me that I was, or she at least convinced me that I was a solid writer. I'm not going to say
Mm.
how great I was, but when you're going through high school and you like, I always struggled with the structure of here's your five paragraphs,
Mhm.
stick to the five paragraphs.
Mhm.
This structure that it's kind of an arbitrary structure, and I understand why they say they have to do it, but I never felt like I always felt like I'm this is just not my thing. And then
Right.
when I get to college and there's like, hey, that five paragraph structure stuff you learn, you better throw that in the trash fast.
Throw it
And
out the window.
yeah, and I'm like, man, I'm excelling. I'm excelling. And so she really enjoyed my writing and she enjoyed my creative writing. And turns out that, I was able to take that into, as I said, I was in radio, television, film, and I was able to take that into the writing side whenever I would do short films and everything. So, I felt like that was a really good motivation. But finally, the person I would like to thank the most, who I attribute to where I am today, is my father. And
Okay.
he was not a teacher, but he taught me the most important lessons I needed to know in life. And so he was the best mentor anybody could ask for. Somebody who grew up single parent, in the
Okay.
inner city, who has every reason to not be where I'm at today. Had every excuse and every reason because I was around all of those things. And um, it was my father, and
Wow.
my father was a strong enough individual to be the village by himself.
Oh
And
wow.
I appreciate him every day. As strict as he was growing up, he is now like my best friend. And as I said, you learn life fast when you're around, you know, a very, very strict father.
Right.
You learn life fast. You learn that this is, you get one shot. This is no man's land out there.
Hmm.
There's there's certain areas and everything where things are going to be harder for you and everything, but you still keep on trucking
Yeah.
because this is it, right? And I felt like just growing up with him, moving around, you know, different places, just my brother, myself, and my father for the first 10 years of my life
Hmm.
before he remarried. It was just that unit, and
Wow.
didn't matter where we were because we moved a lot. But
Hmm.
he was, as I said, he was a strong enough rock to, as I said, in my eyes, represent an entire village because he was our village. No matter where we went, it was us three. And so yeah, and I've thanked my father numerous times, for all the spankings he gave me when I was younger and all those things. I've thanked him numerous times, and I appreciate everything he did. The things that I reflect on and disagree with, I come from it from a lens of he did what he thought was right at the time. He did the best that he could do with the circumstance that he was living in, with the circumstance that he was given.
Mm.
And I just, as I said, now that I'm a father, it's like I'm going to, try to do the good that he did, but also reflect on the things that still to this day may not agree with, and
Right.
take that on with me.
Well, and the the thing about it is that uh, this what you just said about all three of them is one of the main reasons that I love this podcast is because we get to see the uh, how deep of an impact that individuals make on us. And if there's teachers aspiring to make a difference in other people's lives, then this is a great way to do it. You talked about an individual that was open and allowing you to feel like you can come to that person. You talked about another individual that showed you a part of yourself that you did not know existed. And
Hmm.
then you talked about another individual that gave you the foundations through structure, through strict parenting that gave you the stepping stones to become the person that you are today. And that's what your favorite teacher is about. It shows everybody that blueprint of the type of people that impact our lives, not only as young people, but even as adults. You know, um, I look at a lot of people on our campus today that some younger than me, some older than me, that I look at and I'm like, wow, the things that you're doing have opened my eyes to affect the type of person that I am
Sure.
currently. And I'm
Sure.
still growing and still changing through
Hmm.
time. And that is the wonderful thing about uh, your favorite teachers,
Sure.
because they can impact you in a way that not everybody can. So, well, you've given your flowers to those individuals, and hopefully they'll get to hear it on this podcast. And so now, with that being said, let's jump into uh, one of the final sections of the podcast. And this one I like to call Tell Them How You Feel. In this part of the podcast, what I would like for you to do is simply tell the audience, hopefully the parents of students, the public who is not in education, because you think about it, man. We have policymakers out there, people on school boards who have never been inside of a classroom today,
Hmm.
and I emphasize that word today because I have buddies who are administrators right now that have been doing this forever and have been outside of the classroom. And even if you think about the difference between 5 or 6 years ago in
Yes.
the classroom versus being in the classroom today, like how much has changed in
Sure.
that time frame. And so this is your opportunity to talk to the audience, those people who don't get to see what it's like being in the classroom today, and tell them your feelings about what it means to be an educator in today's classroom, some of the uh, uh, trials and tribulations that you have, some of the successes that you have, and what you attribute that to. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you, and I'm going
Sure.
to give you an opportunity to basically tell them how you feel about being an educator.
Okay. I want to say that first off, we are not just working from 8 in the morning till 4. That's the biggest myth out there about educators that still happens today. And people are like, oh, well, you get spring break, you get summer. Yeah, when you've been in the shoes, you'll realize that you kind of need those you kind of need those just to recharge your battery and get ready for the next year. It's and there's also the myth that we get paid throughout the summer. No, we don't. It is a salaried job, and they just stretch our paychecks out through the summer. We are 10-month
Right.
employees in this state. So I want to kill that myth first, that this is not an 8 to 5. We are not, out there singing 9 to 5 and going home and going. off and doing our thing. If I would love to meet the teacher who's doing that.
Mhm.
We are, as you said, I think one of the key words you said was today, because despite the fact that I've been doing this for 17 years, I've been innovating every single year. You have to keep up with the times. You have to keep up with everything. And sure, I meet people who say, "Oh, I'm going to do it my way. My way has worked all of these years and everything." It doesn't though. It just doesn't. Like none of the stuff works that when I first started teaching. Technology has changed so much, and we can do one of two things. We can sit there and be the stubborn people and said they're going to have to adjust to me because you got to adjust to the real world, and the real world's not going to adjust to you. Which I believe there's truth in that statement, but in reality, our goal is to get knowledge into their heads and make them understand our subject. I mean, we're held, that's what we're held accountable for. And so that means that we have to adjust as well. And as I said, constant innovation, constant reflection, constant tweaking. So
Mhm.
even if you present the same thing, it may go great this year. And then the very next year, I can think of an assignment where it was a music inspired assignment. And and you wanted the kids to listen to the music and everything. This is Vietnam. Like, let's go listen to this classic rock. And nowadays, there's sites that just have the lyrics. So I'm not going to listen to the song. Okay, there it is. All right, I'm done. You're like, oh, something that was great, something
Yeah.
that kids used to love. And today's generation just, it's not their thing.
Right.
And there's, and I don't want to be that teacher that just says, well, I'm still going to do it because this is the assignment that I love. It's like it made me realize, like, in a short 2 year span, how
Mhm.
something that you felt was going to be a home run turns out to be a dud. you know you're
Mhm.
you're getting pulled after 3 pitches on that one. And it's like I have to reflect on these decisions that I make, and how it's going to impact the next crop of kids
Mhm.
and think about where these things go wrong. And I have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
There is no such thing as not reinventing the wheel. I have seen Bloom's taxonomy change so many times since I've been in
Oh yeah.
education, to the point where I don't even know, what is the right way to view Bloom's taxonomy.
Right.
But it is an ever evolving world, and we have to be lifelong learners and ever evolving. And I feel like the most successful teachers you see are those who are doing those things. It is not. Um, I don't think there's one right way, one wrong way. I'm not saying that, but I think the one right way is someone who's um, willing to accept the feedback from not just their peers, but the admin and their students.
Right.
Your students sometimes have some good ideas,
Mhm.
and there's nothing wrong with taking that feedback and saying I got to make some adjustments to make it, I guess, to help them achieve a higher rate of success.
Yes, sir.
Because it's not about you as an individual; it's about your students and,
Mm.
and them, making it as far, and you're pushing them as far as you can push them and helping them along the way. So you have to do that. But I don't think, and I know a lot of this I'm speaking from a history context because that's where I spent the majority of my career.
Mhm.
And I don't think, you know, just even in our state, you know, I believe in teaching history, not whatever they want us to teach them that excludes a lot of things that are very important to people of different backgrounds.
Mhm.
And I look at it as this is all our history.
Yep.
All of this is our history. To have to exclude things due to discomfort
Mm.
for specific groups who don't understand that some of those other things create discomfort for these other groups that we have to
Mhm.
learn, I think is very, very, just very a narrow-minded way of thinking.
Right.
And it's like why not just teach history? You know, why not just say, hey, this is what happened. I'm not saying this is a reflection of today, as far as those people have these same thoughts, but this is reality. Um, I'm a straight shooter. I'm an A to B guy. I don't like
Exactly.
sugarcoating. I don't like that stuff. I'd rather somebody who hates me just straight up tell me I hate me versus be passive aggressive. And so when it comes to the way I taught history, it's just like, hey, it's just what happened. I can't change what happened. What happened
Right.
happened.
Right.
And I wish that for the sake of knowledge, because I believe knowledge is power. Um, I just wish for the sake of knowledge that we just be willing to accept our past so we can everybody can know and everybody can have a better understanding of everybody else's situations as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my history take towards any politicians out there listening who might be listening. But I'm not a history teacher anymore, so don't worry about it. But from the CTE side, I think it's great. I believe at some point when teachers are proving that they can do their job, give them a little bit of freedom.
Yes.
Let them do their thing. If they keep giving you what you're asking them to do, let them do things their way.
Yes.
It's they have to enjoy what they're doing to give it their all. They have
Mm-hmm.
to enjoy what they're doing to give it their all. So I understand that we have metrics that we're meeting and metrics that we aim for, but once they're showing you that they can hit those metrics, let them do their thing.
Yeah.
You want to do your best to keep them helping those kids. And if their way is working, I'm not saying anything that's illegal, obviously, but I'm talking about within the confines of reality and the confines of a structure and not, hurting this group or that group. I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
if like I feel like there's a lot of stress being put into this idea that here's a script, follow the script. But it's like that script doesn't work for everybody. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you can't sit there and take any actor and tell them to follow the script and they get the same performance.
Right.
It's that script is engineered for a particular actor. So in our world, you have to view it that way, where some of us are more eccentric, some of us are more, serious, but if their method works, leave it be,
Mm-hmm.
and as long as they're meeting the state standards as far as what they're talking about and all those other things, give them freedom. Is
Yeah.
another message I would like to say to people out there. Like we wouldn't be in this if we weren't passionate about it, and
Yes.
and let us express ourselves through our work, just like a lot of people do. This is not corporate America, so don't try
Mm-mm.
to compare it to corporate America.
Mm-mm.
Let us do our thing. And I think that you'll see um, these record, these everybody leaving education. You'll start to see things like that change. Um,
Yeah.
There's a reason why people are leaving. So I think holistically, I guess the holistic message is we'll start investigating why people are leaving the profession and do what we can to make people want to stay.
Yeah.
And
Well, here's the thing. I just had an educator from the last district that I worked at on the podcast. She's left education. Um, let me just ask you, what do you think some of the reasons are that teachers are leaving education nowadays? Why is there such a mass exodus?
um, I will never say it's the pay because going in, we know that that's not going to be something that's a part of it. And I think most people attribute it to the pay.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that the pay comes in when you say you're demanding this of me at this
Right.
value.
Right.
And I think that that's where the problem is. I feel like over the years that I've been in education, more of, I would say the workload has increased
Right.
as far as the expectations. And,
Mm-hmm.
and when the pay adjusted to inflation is not changing that much, and
Mm-hmm.
people are like, I'll just go out to corporate America. I almost feel like that just through experience, I've been able to kind of work a system out
Hmm.
And it does that's it doesn't bother me as much as it does others. But
Right.
I've met plenty of teachers who are like, I can go make more money doing less,
Right.
right? And so I think that that's what it is. It's not necessarily the pay because they came in knowing what the pay was, but if you come in knowing what the pay was and then gradually your workload is increasing,
Hmm.
then now people are evaluating, their hourly rate versus the amount of work they're doing, which is a smart thing for people to do. And I will
Right.
never tell anybody, like I tell everybody, you know your own value. And
Hmm.
if you feel that you are not being, get compensated for your value, then go off and figure out what's right for you. I understand that. And I also, as I said, I think now that they're trying, and this is not all districts, not all schools, but I've seen specific schools where everything has to be streamlined and everything has to be this way. And when teachers lose their own identity in their classroom or feel like they're losing their own identity, and like, I teach it this way. Oh, well, we're all doing it this way, so you have to do it this way.
Mm.
Like I feel like people get lost in this idea of common assessment, and
Mm.
to the point where common assessment should mean what they say it means. And I also think part of common assessment means that when we look at the data, if my way is working, just because we're set in our ways doesn't mean that we stay set in our ways, and
Hmm.
we start to explore other avenues and give people autonomy. So, because as I
Mm.
said, when you put that much passion into something, you want to do things somewhat to your own method, and just like any other job, you should earn the right and the respect from your peers to be able to do that if it's working, because at the end of the day, if it's all about benefiting the kids and you're showing it with all the metrics that they're asking you to do and everything, let them do their thing, because I think that that'll keep people around, will keep them happier. I've met too many teachers that are just the biggest things I hear are, as I said, the loss of autonomy.
Hmm.
The workload is increasing
Mm.
without the pay increase,
Right.
and the last is just a lot of them feel that there's no support from admin, and I think that those are the three biggest that I've heard throughout my day.
Hmm.
Whether I agree or disagree with an individual, that's how they feel,
Right.
and I
Right.
can't change how they feel.
Exactly.
Because I've been in situations where I've disagreed. Like even when it came to the big one for a lot, which is admin support, I always ask them, well, did you do these things? And they're like, well, no, I don't have time to do that. Well, like
Exactly.
that's part of our job, and maybe that goes back to, maybe that will then trickle into the workload versus
Yep.
pay,
Yes.
and so that's so they could always go back to that. But I would say that those are the big three that I probably hear.
Hmm.
Like I'm pot committed to this profession. I'm going to stay in till year one of eligibility of retirement, and after that, and it's not because I dislike education. It has nothing to do with that. It's just that I have other ambitions that
Right. Right.
I wanna go after, and I feel like I've, as I said, it's not a toot and horn thing. I feel like I've given back to the community.
You have.
I've spent my time in, places where most people would say run from. I've spent many years in those schools, and and I enjoyed my time there. I will never say I did not enjoy my time there. I felt like, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about life and situations when and when you see kids going through things that you couldn't even fathom.
Hmm.
And it really, it is an enlightening experience. And there's a lot, you grow a lot faster in those schools. You'd be surprised how fast you figure things out because you're forced to. If your goal as a teacher is to help those kids, you will you will learn faster working at inner city school than anywhere else.
That's so
And
true.
there's some people who can't do it, and I'm not saying I don't respect those people. I can respect them because it is tough. It is
Yes.
tough, and you're going to deal with a lot. But so I feel like, when that day comes, like I'll be ready to try the next phase of life, and it's just I have other ambitions. I've
Yes.
spoken to you about some of them, so
Yes.
there's just other ambitions out there, other things I want to try, and if I miss it, I'll come back, and that's just how it works. If I miss it, I'll come back. So
I,
it's the
I
door is
do
always
know
open.
that you're going to be successful in your next endeavor as well. Um, and you hit on so many key things about why these educators are leaving the profession. And in the short time that I've been in education, like I have seen how much more work
Hmm.
an educator has to deal with. Uh, and it I get it. I do get
Hmm.
it. I get how that can wear down on you to the point to where you're like, maybe I might want to look at another
Hmm.
profession. That coupled with not having support
Sure.
from uh, the people who are over you and removing the autonomy. Listen, if people come into this profession of education because you you said it, want to make a difference in the young people's lives. But if you are constrained by specific policies and ways of doing things, then you see that you aren't able to impact the young men and women that
Hmm.
sit in front of you the way that you would if you
Sure.
had that autonomy uh, uh, that we as educators think that we're supposed to have.
Sure.
So that is, I think those are all amazing and extremely valid points of why we see so many educators leaving this profession. And I hate that that's the case. And hopefully, podcasts like this and others that are out there talking about the things that people as educators are going through on a daily basis opens up the eyes of those people who are policymakers to say, you
Sure.
know what, let's sit down and let's have a conversation about what's really going on and how can we really invoke change
Sure.
in our education
Sure.
system. I think one of the biggest things that you talked about during this podcast is the evolution of what it means to be an educator. Because if we stay stagnant in what it is that we're doing as educators, then we are harming the growth of our
Sure.
students.
Sure.
Um, there was something that I read a while back that talked about when paper came into the classroom, people were outraged. Oh, they need their chalkboards to write on, and they're never going to get it when they get a paper. And nowadays, when you hear educators talk about, oh, I need my kids to write on paper
Hmm.
because using
Hmm.
that computer is so it's going to hurt them. They're not going to
Hmm.
remember what they're doing. Well, you're talking about a time frame in which you grew up and
Sure.
what works best for you. We
Exactly.
have a different set of kids. Anybody who
Hmm.
have more than one kid at the house knows that how kids respond and how kids learn are different. Even
Sure.
if they're brought up in the same
Hmm.
household, my two sons are like night and day when
Hmm.
it comes to learning stuff. And that's just the nature of the beast.
Sure.
And us
And
understanding how these students learn best and not imposing our beliefs and our thoughts on what works for us. And I believe
exactly.
you said this earlier, onto the students, and instead asking the students, hey, what works for you? What
Hmm.
can I do to help you become better or successful? That's that's the thing that we should be able to do as
Sure.
educators, and and I can sit up here and talk about that for hours
Sure.
on end. I didn't mean to jump on a soapbox
It's okay.
with
There
that,
is
but
one last thing I do want to
yes, sir.
mention,
Yes,
going
sir.
back to the workload. I
Uh-huh.
want people, politicians, parents to understand that there's a lot of teachers who I personally know who
Mm-hmm.
have a very unhealthy work-life balance for the sake
Mm.
of your kids.
Mm-hmm.
A very unhealthy work-life balance for the sake of your kids. And
Mm-hmm.
I want people to hear that, and I want them to think about that before they just say that, or look down upon the profession. When I took a sabbatical and I moved away and took a break from education for a year, it was almost insulting how, when I was looking for work, how people viewed my experience in education
Mm.
as, so you just did a post high school gig, essentially.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's no, I don't think people understand the amount of overall knowledge you need to be a successful teacher.
Oh,
We're doing
yes.
a lot of things. We are tracking data. We are, like you said, learning new programs for computers. There's a lot that we do. I think that and I think we're one of the most well-rounded jack of all trades professions there are, that you can
Mm-hmm.
almost plug and play into almost any other profession and you can find a valid use for that person. And so I
Yes.
think that there is a disrespect that goes towards teachers. It's almost like they think we're glorified babysitters. And it's like, we are constantly around people who are masters of subjects
Right.
and we talk. And
Right.
there, I have worked with college professors. I have learned from in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and so these are people who have PhDs not in education. So if you devalue a PhD in education, sure, I'm not going to fight you on that. But we're talking about somebody with a PhD in history, a
Mm-hmm.
PhD in chemistry, a
Yes.
PhD in subjects, and we converse with these people on a daily. Like our brains are always learning new things all the time. So this just goes out to anybody out there who just thinks that, this is a job that anybody can do. It requires not just knowledge of your own subject, and then of course now with I forget what's cross-curricular activities,
Mm-hmm.
you have to incorporate other subjects, meaning that,
Right.
even if you grew up not being strong in math as a teacher, sometimes if you want to cross over a math, you're teaching yourself those things. Our
Mm-hmm.
brains are constantly being fine-tuned.
Yes, sir.
And it is, but the other one, like, a lot of teachers' work-life balance is unhealthy because of the sacrifice they're making for your kids. And I just hope people remember that.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, there's nothing that I can say on top of that. I will I will yield my time to that because it's the truth. It's the truth. And so with that, this brings us to the end of the podcast. And at this point, I know you said you don't have any social medias out there, but I still open the floor to you to let people know where they can get in contact with you in case they want to, you know, talk to you, have you come in and talk to their people. This is just your opportunity to let people know where they can find you, and then we'll just close out the show.
I will, as I said, I will open up a Twitter account and I'll give you the information. I have not done it yet.
Yes, yeah,
I've been on my anti-social media thing for a few years. It's just, I don't know. Sometimes it's just better just to put down the phone and enjoy life for what it is,
right.
and so it's been a few years, but I will do that and I will check it hopefully regularly. But
Yes.
and we'll go from there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And as always, his information, once he gives it to me, will be on the website at wdsinnovations.us. Once again, that's WDS Innovations, where we do simple innovations for your edtech needs at US. All right. And with that being said, guys, we are out of here. Have a great one. Peace. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of Your Favorite Teacher's Favorite Teacher podcast. If you have a story you'd like to share, please contact me at wdstubblefield@wdsi.us. Again, that is wdstubblefield@wdsi.us. And you could be our next inspirational story of how educators impact our lives. I'm your host, Mr. Stubblefield, and I want you to remember, no profession is possible without your favorite teacher.